Here we go. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Travel Mole broadcast. And as promised a couple of weeks ago, we're keeping up to date with the empirical evidence from the US travel economy, courtesy of my good friend Amir, who is on the other end of the line in the sunny, warm, swampy Chicago. Good morning, Amir.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Amir, you sent me your latest traveller sentiment research yesterday. Again, not a positive outlook, I would say, based upon a number of the metrics. Perhaps you can explain a bit more, and if you have any, perhaps you can show some graphics as well to illustrate where the travel economy appears to be heading.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Let me share my screen real quickly here, and I'll show you a few quick highlights here. There's not a lot of good news, but there is some good news. So we'll show you the good, the bad, and the ugly here. So on the positive side, despite the Delta variant surging here in the US, we are seeing that 88% of American travelers are still telling us that they have plans to travel somewhere in the next 6 months. Hang on to this notion right here, because that's a very, very strong pent-up demand to travel still within the leisure segment. So hang on to that thought. We're seeing, the end of the summer travel season here in the U.S. is coming to a close. Children are going back to school, so forth. So no surprise that the great majority of travel trips are shifted away from within the next 30 days to into the fall and toward the U.S. holiday season there, and we've seen that evidenced. A couple other things I just want to call attention to is that this is also the first time we're seeing a slight uptick in travelers telling us that their concerns about their personal financial situation may indeed greatly impact their decision to travel in the next 6 months. What you're seeing here is not a huge jump, but at 26%. That's the highest point we've recorded since the beginning of this tracking study. So we're very, 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 very keen to see, the inflation here in the U.S. has been on the rise consistently over the last several months. So we're seeing that impact happening. A lot of folks have already spent their government issued stimulus checks over the summer, have applied them towards their summer vacations and so forth. So we're going to watch this one very, very closely. Same pattern with transportation costs. Gas prices rose tremendously here in the U.S. They've airfares were skyrocketing, although now they're starting to go back down as we've gotten into the fall season and so forth. So we're going to watch these very, very carefully. The other not so great news is that 59% of American travelers are telling us right now that they're planning to change their upcoming travel plans due to the pandemic. And you see this chart here, it's kind of been a roller coaster throughout the pandemic. You can almost chart every single surge that's happened here. And of course, we're on the upswing again, but that's a significant growth. We hit a survey low of 43% back at the end of June. In 2 months, we've gone up 16 points. So folks are changing, but silver linings. I promised you silver linings, Graham. What we've got here is, look at this, only 11% of travelers are actually canceling their trips overall. And that number, even at the best numbers we saw, which was during the middle of the summer, June, July, only 9% were canceling then. So it's only been a slight increase, a slight blip in the volume of those American travelers canceling. Now, how are they changing their plans? Same pattern we've seen throughout. About a quarter are giving up on international travel plans, outbound international, when they're picking a U.S. destination instead. About a quarter are reducing the number of trips they're taking, but they'll take longer trips, just not as many. And then about a quarter are choosing regional drive markets versus flying markets. I'm going to jump real quickly here and also show you that the news cycle has a major influence on travel sentiment. For up until the last couple of weeks, the leading stories have been coronavirus, Delta. In the last week, when we fielded the survey, the number one story was pulling the military out of Afghanistan, and number two, our western coast of the U.S. has been hit with a lot of wildfires. So those have been the top two stories. Delta has really been the number three story for many news outlets. So look at this. No surprise, we saw a quick little rebound in support for opening up communities to visitors. We've seen a stabilization in those feeling safe traveling outside their community, and we saw a slight little rebound in those feeling safe dining and shopping locally. So the media is definitely influencing behavior here. And last thing I'll share with you here is we've seen some stabilization. I think last time you and I spoke, about 1 out of 3 American travelers were telling us that they were postponing their travel to later in the year or even early new year. That number still holds. It only went up a couple points, about 36%, up from 34 just 2 weeks ago. So, so we're happy to see that stabilization. All these things rolled up together. I want to tell you, Graham, we think that we have a theory that's emerging here, because you see this travel being postponed, traveling being changed, but still 88% looking to travel in the next 6 months. American travelers have learned to travel within the pandemic. They've taken their first trips, they've taken their summer vacations this year for the most part, and they are now willing to accept a higher level of personal risk when they travel. They traveled, most of them didn't get sick. Very few, had anything horrible happen to them. So they said, this isn't bad. I can do this. I'm okay with flying with a mask. I'm okay with exercising additional protocols. Maybe I'm going to continue going to more outdoor type of destinations and so forth. But I have learned to travel, and I'm willing to keep traveling. So that's a silver lining for you.
Very good. I like the silver linings. Now, do you? One of the things you mentioned there that people are perhaps not intending to travel internationally. That would be a blow to a lot of European countries and indeed the UK, when you consider that the US comprises a very large percentage of inbound visitors, and particularly inbound spend. This is supposition, this is theory, this is your best guess, but do you see that changing anytime soon, or do you think it will be a considerable time? And when I say considerable time, I mean maybe another year before people feel more relaxed about traveling overseas?
I don't think the hesitation is really there about traveling overseas to markets like the UK. I think the key is that they just can't, due to regulations or extra hassles and limited air service and so forth. So I think what you're going to see is, as soon as we get past this Delta surge and things kind of stabilize again, and as our governments work more closely together to help ensure the smooth reopening of non-essential travel, I think what you're going to see is a lot of these travelers that put off for the last 2 years, their international travelers, that's going to be their first thing. I think that's going to be one of their bucket list items is, I'm going to take that first international trip as soon as I can. So I think it bodes well from the outbound US to the UK. From that.
And do you have any feel for the fact that the UK, we have one of the best vaccinated populations in the world, both single and double vaxxed people. Do you think that appears in anybody's mind when they're planning international travel, thinking that they will come to the UK because it's a relatively safe haven in terms of, I'm not going to catch it, or if it's unlikely because the majority of people have now been vaccinated?
I do. Not in our data. We haven't been asked those questions, but there's been other studies out there that we've seen, other reports, and I think anecdotally reporting off these studies that there is a comfort level with certain markets like the UK and Canada and other allied nations that have typically seen very, very high vaccination rates. There's a certain comfort level there, and I think that's why I think the UK will be one of those primary destinations that American travelers will be selecting over other and perhaps more exotic destinations where there's not as much penetration with the vaccine.
And have you noticed, again, and not necessarily empirically, but just observing that from the inbound tourism to the US, I know it's fairly restricted at the moment, but that those that are coming in, is there any reluctance given the Delta surge and the relatively low numbers of vaccination in the US?
Yeah, it's still just a trickle. We really can't say for sure yet. what type of impact our vaccination rates are happening. But the few international visitors that are coming in for non-essential travel purposes. I mean, when you think about it, look at the deaths. Well, some of them are coming in to get vaccinated, depending on what markets they're coming from. But others, if you look at where they're going, they are going to some of the traditional beach destinations, et cetera, where they were going before the pandemic. So we are seeing some traditional behavior from the very few international visitors that are coming in.
And I also noticed finally on this particular slide you've put up that I'm choosing to destinations I can drive to as opposed to fly. Do you get a feel for that's because it's people perceive that as safer, it's more convenient, you don't have to wear, if you're in your own car, you don't have to wear a mask, you don't have to go through the protocols and all the rest of the inhibitants, if you like, to air travel?
Yeah, we've been tracking this factor since the very beginning of the pandemic. It's always been between 25 to 30 to 1/3% of American travelers that were opting to drive versus flying. It is exactly for those reasons. I control the environment. I cleaned my car. I know who's been in my car. And there are definitely two things: perception of safety, and then in recent months, an affordability factor. There, as air travel, the planes this summer were packed, and the airfares were growing exponentially, and as the airlines were seeking to make up for lost revenues. So we've definitely seen those two factors really driving the regional drive market.
Good. Well, I think everybody thinks that there's some sort of nirvana going to happen at the end of this year, early 2022. Let's hope that that's true as far as COVID and travel is concerned.
Yeah, I think the outlook is good. Again, with the data that we're seeing, I think there's going to be a very quick rebound, even though there's a drop off happening right now due to the Delta variant. And again, kids going back to school here in the U.S. And actually going into the classrooms versus online this year. I think you will see a good rebound on leisure side of things. I think business travel, once we get past this surge, will pick up where it was living off on its path to recovery. I think we were domestically here in the U.S. we were at about 40% or 45% of pre-pandemic levels of business travel. So we hope to see that continuing again. And again, very importantly, I think the international travel is just around the corner. And once we can get to have that back, then we can hit our nirvana, right?
Good. Well, Amir, I wish you the very best today in Chicago. Stay in the air conditioning, won't you?
Will do.
Lovely. Thanks. And I look forward to speaking to you after your next batch of research.
Look forward to it.
Cheers.